Okay, on with our program this morning. It's my pleasure to introduce an old colleague of mine, Dr. Moshe Engelberg. Moshe didn't come with the advantage of a USD degree like these folks have, but he made up for that with a PhD at Stanford. He subsequently formed a company called ResearchWorks in Serrano Valley, and they're very deep into the space of doing market research and market communications. He'll tell you more about that story. Moshe, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Kurt. All right, glad to be here with you. This topic is focused on the customer, as you can tell. And the talk I'm presenting has evolved and is still evolving, so I do welcome your feedback during and after the talk. Basically, how this came about is for about 20 years we've been working with different kinds of organizations. Many of them are what I would call do-gooders. And maybe you're a do-gooder, the organization you work with is a do-gooder. And what I mean by that is there tends to be some social mindedness. Now, they may have a primary focus on making money, that's fine. Sometimes it's to advance their mission. Typically, the organizations we work with are in the business of health, like CDC, or social services like ARP, and some education, like Stanford and other universities. So fundamentally, organizations come to us with problems like, people don't know we exist. Has anyone run into that? Okay, a few. Or we are underknown, undervalued. We are so good, we have such good people, yet we're hurting. What's going on? So a lot of the problems we address are based on the fundamental issue of an organization not fulfilling its potential. And there's lots of reasons why that could be. A couple months ago, Michael Lurie, who's in the back, spoke about business models. That's a big part of it. A few months before that, we had, there was a talk about the whole issue of how to work and coach one another. That was the peer coaching, Rancho Santa Fe, Marshall Goldsmith, as well as many other things. So there's a lot of reasons, a lot of angles. The lenses we're going to be looking through today are the lenses of the customer. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this experience or wondered about this, but have you ever knocked at a door or had someone knock at your door and you say, "Who's there?" And the person says, "It's me." So you may have run into that. And that struck me as a very odd thing to say. So the person at the door knows they're them, obviously, they're who they are. But the person on the other side of the door is asking the question because they don't know who it is, so the answer "me" doesn't really give much information. But it reflects that mindset of everybody sees the world the way I see it. And that's a fundamental problem in all kinds of businesses that leads to, in my opinion, in my experience, a lot of mistakes being made. So if we can step outside of ourselves and into the shoes of the customer, which is really being empathic, we can really advance our business objectives. So that's the premise of this. The bottom line is doing better. Advance your mission, make more money. So this happens a lot. Things go wrong. It's not our fault. This is kind of a CYA strategy. The customers just don't think the way we do. Therefore, who needs to change? The customers. Doesn't happen that way. So we're going to cover 5 things today. One is how you do business. Second is the power of the customer, what their role is, what is an appropriate way to involve the customer and give them control so they're sitting in the seat next to the CEO. The third is, if you buy into this, and it is not for everybody, I want to add at the outset, adopting this mindset of customer CEO is not for everybody. If everybody walks out of the room thinking, we should do this, I'm not doing my job. Because there's a selectivity and there's a certain kind of commitment that goes with it. I'll speak more about that as we keep going. If you do choose to go in this direction, there's the issue of making the changes internally, both to your business model and to your culture, transforming the company. Once you do that, then it's executing. How do you get your house in order? What are the specific things to do? And I'll suggest some tools along that front that ties in marketing, branding, and the whole issue of being customer-centric or minimally customer-driven. And then once you get there, how do you stay there? How do you stay the course? For some of us, it's easy to make change. Some of us are in an ADD culture. It's easy to make change. but it's hard to sustain it. How do you make that happen? So these are the points we're going to cover today. I want to play you a clip from a movie you might have seen. And I'm going to go midway through the clip, stop for a moment, make a comment or two, and then play the rest of the clip.
Jerry Maguire, how you doing?
Jerry Maguire. How am I doing? I'll tell you how I'm doing. I'm sweating, dude. I'm sweating my contract. I'm sweating Bob Sugar calling me, telling me I'm missing the big endorsements by being with me. That's how I know I'm sweating. You know what I'm saying?
Listen, I hear what you're saying, and that's why I'm calling.
No. I hear that you hear what I'm saying, but do you truly hear what I'm saying?
Maybe the best thing is that we get together in person. Well, I'm sorry, would you mind holding? I just got someone.
Didn't you tell my wife for personal attention? Did you not tell my wife for personal attention?
I said more personal attention.
Hey. No, Madam Jerry. I am a fan of the support. Hear me? I want to stay in Arizona. I want a new contract. But I like you. Yes, I like you, Jerry. My wife likes you. You're good to my wife. I will stay with you.
That's great. I'm really happy.
Are you listening?
Yes.
That's what I'm doing for you. God bless you, Jerry. But this is what you're going to do for me. You listen? Jerry?
Yeah, what can I do for you, Ron? You just tell me what can I do for you.
It's a very personal, very important thing. Hell, it's a family matter. Are you ready, Jerry? I'm ready. Just want to make sure you're ready, brother. Here it is. Show me money.
Okay, so an example of getting close to the customer, a kind of extreme one. What do you see that happened there that expresses something about being customer-oriented? Go ahead.
Personal attention.
Personal attention. Someone else was saying something here? What can I do for you? Yes.
I fire the customer.
You would fire that customer.
Even though it was very annoying, he still stayed on the line.
Yes.
He didn't take other calls.
He stayed on the line. He was letting go of other customers, and that'll come back to him in just a moment. So this next piece is he's reflecting on what happened, and he's changing. He's been in a cutthroat business, working with top-end athletes, helping them get contracts and endorsements and make more money, and now things are shifting. And he has to leave the company he's been with, the company he helped build, and he's going out on his own. He's going on a tough road. So he's reflecting on that and stepping back, and you'll see what he has to say. I thought you'd see what he has to say. Let me see if I can. Well, one of the rules in presenting is if it doesn't work, keep going. So what he was saying afterwards is, I realize I've been doing things wrong. It was an epiphany, an aha to him. He's saying, it's not about more customers, it is about less customers. It's about getting closer. And he cites his mentor who said, it's all about relationships. So he's getting this big insight that dramatically changes how he works. And if you've seen the movie, it's roller coastery, but it ends up being a good thing. So fundamentally, this approach of putting the customer in the chair next to you as the leader of an organization means you make some changes. That's why I say it's not for everybody. It may mean you have less customers. You'll be giving up some customers. Maybe they're ones, the PITA ones. PITA, pain in the ass, customers. You're letting go of them. Or it's other ones who are less profitable or who just don't fit this approach to business. So there's some significant changes that need to happen. So that's first reflecting the idea of how do you do business now? Here's some questions to ask. as you step back and look at your organization, whether you're a student and you've worked prior, you're looking to the future, or you're heading an organization now, what's your measure of success? What's the one question you ask to say, we are on target? Any volunteers? Yes, please.
Your customer retention.
Okay. Customer retention, which ties very directly into a commitment to being customer-centric, toward customer intimacy. Anyone else?
Well, we have a way to actually quantify the experience. We survey everybody, and we have actually a score system.
Okay.
And we actually we go deep. We ask for not only for like satisfaction with the product, but how they felt about us, you know.
Okay. So in terms of customers, you go deep and ask several kinds of things.
A lot of things.
Okay.
We quantify.
All right. So it's important to be able to tie in your metrics into your fundamental purpose. Is it working? Is your company on track and doing what it needs to do? And who do you involve for input? Do you sit around the table with your internal folks and ask? Do you go and talk to customers? Do you talk to investors? Who do you talk to? It matters. And most importantly, what do you do with feedback you get?
Implement them. They're good.
Ideally, you implement the feedback. We've worked with a lot of organizations who get feedback because it's the quote-unquote right thing to do and they can check off the box, but they really don't want to act on it. Why? Because they know what they want to do, and they don't want to be steered off that course. So these are some key questions to keep in mind as you consider, should we adopt this customer CEO approach or not? Another thing to consider is what drives your decision making. And this is true for any company, any organization. All these things are important. Your values, what you're passionate about, what makes money, a vision to guide the way. All of these are important. If you think about Jim Collins' work in Good to Great and the hedgehog concept, you may be familiar with that. He talks about three things. One is, what are you passionate about? What drives your economic engine? And what can you be better at than anyone else in the world? Those are key questions that's meant to be captured by this. In my humble opinion, that leaves out the voice of the customer. And I think the hedgehog concept is enriched by adding the customer perspective and making it front and center. So consider what drives your decision making. So you should be able to look at this if you're in a company and running the company or in a management role and saying, we're mostly driven by passion, which means you could jump around a lot based on where the current passion lies. Or it's all about money. We focus on what makes us the most money the quickest. So here's where we aim to get. And this is meant to be a metaphor for the customer having a chair next to the CEO. So if you adopt this, you can easily demonstrate this metaphor by having a chair in the CEO's office, in your office, and saying it's the customer. And there's different traditions that embody the idea of someone who's not there being present. There's a Jewish holiday, the Passover holiday. And on that holiday, there's a lot of wine that's drunk on that holiday. You have to. Obligation. And on that holiday, there's the idea of putting an extra glass of wine for Elijah the prophet. And the kids, it's filled to the brim, and the kids watch the cup of wine. Did he come yet? Did he come yet? And there's part of the ceremony where we open the door and welcome Elijah and watch, see if the cup of wine went down. Well, it's the idea of welcoming this presence, and by acknowledging that presence, someone who we can't see, it changes our thinking. So if you have a tangible reminder, this is the customer's chair, it can make a difference. What this gets at is what values drive your organization. What's the value discipline? And this is modified from work by Michael Treacy and Fred Weersma, who I think it was about 15 years ago wrote an article in Harvard Business Review about value disciplines. At the time they were saying they're mutually exclusive. You got to choose one. Since then they've refined that and said, no, you got to be at parity at two and excel in one, which is more what I think. We all have to be good at all these. We all have to have leading products, good products. We have to be good operationally and have some degree of customer intimacy. But what my premise is, if you focus on customer intimacy and put them in the middle, you will do better. If it's for you. If it's for you. So keep this in mind and think about companies who exemplify these. So if I say product leadership, who comes to mind? Apple. I was going to give you a hint, a piece of fruit. Apple often comes up. So what happens is companies, we work with a lot of medical device companies who are technologically minded and stuff-driven, so to speak, and they're often saying, well, let's make it look like the iPod. And iPods are pretty cool, they're nice, and Apple wins on form factor and look and feel and coolness. But it's hard to emulate that always, and Apple has a model that happens to work. They have a CEO who can know what's going to sell, and he hits the mark pretty well. But it doesn't work for everybody, and what we learn in doing research and talking to customers in the healthcare industry is they say things like, we don't need the best. If we need to get this machine, we can buy a good one for $10,000, a workhorse, or top of the line for $18,000. I'd rather have 2 workhorses. We don't need the best. So predicated on this assumption of product leadership is people need the best. And that's something worth questioning. We hear a lot across industries, we don't need the best. Good enough is good enough. And with operational excellence, who comes to mind? I'm sorry? Toyota's good at that. They've had a couple bumps. They're very good at that. I'm sorry? Southwest. And Southwest is an example that arguably crosses over. And Walmart's another one that comes up for operational efficiency. So one way to know customer intimacy, we were talking with a client the other day who said, I want you to talk to our customers about our brand, our reputation, how we establish a leadership position, and we just want customers to get us. That was how she was operationalizing customer intimacy. We want them to get us. And we all kind of know what that means. We need to drill down and put metrics to it, but that was her way of expressing customer intimacy. So there's barriers. I said it's not for everyone. Here are some of the barriers. One is it means change. As I said before, some people love change, some people are reluctant. There's tradition. It's always how we've done things. And this is more true in the educational realm and nonprofits in healthcare. There's a lot of copycat. Well, they got this big new fancy machine, so we need to get it. They did this, we need to get it. We've always done it this way. There's those kinds of objections, which are real, kind of silly, but real, and there's ways to overcome them. Sometimes we get calls from clients who say, we know what to do, but we can't make it happen. We need to pay an outside consultant to come in and tell us what we know so that our leadership will believe us. You say, really? I say, yeah, that's the situation. Sometimes you may have run into that. That's a problem within the company. Adopting that customer intimacy value idea takes time. It's not an overnight fix. So if you're focused on quarterly revenues, what are the numbers? What are the numbers? Are we hitting the numbers? This is going to be tough to sell internally. There's no guarantee you're going to hit the numbers these quarters. As one of you said earlier about a metric for being close to the customer, it's about retaining the customer. So a key metric here is the lifetime value of a customer. It's not how much they bought this quarter. It's about the lifetime value and how long you keep them. So the metrics are really different. When you have a scorecard or a dashboard, the metrics are fundamentally different. It's about retention. It's about if your customers bought within 2 product lines, how can you get them to buy within 5 product lines? That's a metric of successful customer closeness. It's not necessarily about acquiring a whole bunch of new customers. It's acquiring the right customers. So that's why this is not for everybody. Can you deliver on the promise? There was, in reviewing some articles for this talk, there was one saying that was, if a relationship doesn't deliver any benefits, it's just a pain in the rear end. So we all have relationships. Our lives are built around relationships. But if you're not getting any value, what's the point of the relationship? It can just be a simple transaction. So if you cannot deliver on the promise of customer intimacy and making that investment and connecting with customers and knowing who they are and customizing what you offer to their needs, then you don't want to go down this path. So you've got to be able to deliver on your promise. And it means letting go, and it means being willing to be wrong. So you can say, we should develop this new product. I've been guilty of that heading up my company. I've been doing it for 20 years, and there's sometimes things I want to do, and Teresa, who works with me, can attest that sometimes I'll say, let's do this, and then we'll get feedback from customers to say, bad idea, and it's really hard to let go of because I just know it's right. So you may have had that experience. You just know something is right, and sometimes it's worth following through. There's some things customers can't give us feedback on because it's an idea. It's not something they may be able to grasp yet. Someone asked you about a laptop, a wireless laptop, 20 years ago. You might have said, I don't know. What is it? It's just something hard to conceive of. So there are exceptions, but generally we say let's at least include the customer voice. Give them the chair at the table. So again, you might be wrong. So these are barriers to adopting this. I want to put it on the table because this approach is not for everybody. But if it's for you, it can really make significant changes in your bottom line. So if you're wrong, what happens? What do you do? Focus group hated it, so we showed it to an out of focus group. Then they liked it. So there are solutions. One way to think about being close to the customer and putting them front and center, letting them help you drive things, is a hierarchy of relationships. So there's a transaction. I'll give you $1, you'll give me a bottle of water. We don't know each other, doesn't matter, we're done. And then there's a relationship. And a lot of transactional marketing evolved into relationship marketing in the 1990s or so. And we developed tools, customer relationship management tools, CRM tools, and so on. But it's evolving beyond that into a partnership. So when we work, for example, in hospitals and universities and other organizations, we often hear our vendors, and they call them vendors, not partners, our vendors and the people who work with us often are just looking to sell more stuff, whether it's services or products. They're just looking to sell more. They're not really looking to help us succeed. They say they are, but they're more concerned about their dollar than they are about providing us with the solution. If they're really our partner, they'll show up after hours. They'll answer the phone when we need them. They'll be there to help us even if that particular interaction does not make them money. So we hear about some of the best sales reps are those who say, I'll show up anytime, and if you have a problem with something you didn't buy from us, call me. I'll help you out because I want you to be successful. Who do you think they're going to call when they need something? They'll call that person. So it's establishing that kind of connection and making that kind of commitment. Transaction, relationship, partnership. Some businesses do better transactionally. Some do better with relationships. I see partnership as the highest level and the one to aspire to. So bottom line questions. What business are you in? Peter Drucker, a leading management consultant for years and years, passed away a couple years ago, would ask this question first. He'd ask two questions. What business are you in? Companies would have trouble answering. The classic story is the railroads. They thought they were in the business of trains and didn't realize they were in the business of transportation, and hence they are where they are, and airplanes are where they are, which I guess, except for Southwest, is not such a great place after all. But missing that they were in the business of transportation took them way off course. Why should people choose you? What do you do best that makes you the most money? So I'd like to take 3 minutes now and ask you to pair up with someone who you don't know and just answer these questions for the company you're with, a company you've been with recently, or if you're a student now, you can answer from the USD perspective. So just take 3 minutes and answer these questions, and I'll tell you when half the time's up so you can swap. So go, introduce yourself to the next person. This is customer intimacy. Okay, time to wrap it up. Okay, come on back, please. So, a couple volunteers. First off, show of hands. How many found it easy to answer the first question? Okay, about half of you. How many found it easy to answer the second question? Okay, a little bit less. And the third question? Okay. You had a whole minute and a half. Okay. So is there anyone who'd like to share what they came up with? We'll just do one or two. Yeah, please.
Yeah, we talked about the fact that we're in the business of changing lives.
That you're in the business of
Changing lives.
changing, and what business is this?
University of San Diego.
Okay, changing lives. Okay, and why should people choose you?
Because we offer a really focused experience for our customer markets. We provide them an educational experience that does transform lives, is accessible, and is designed for a specific segment of the market.
Okay, so when you say things like that, the key litmus test is plug in UCSD, plug in San Diego State, plug in other schools, and see if they could say the same thing. We often do this mission statement challenge. Read your mission statement, plug in the name of the competitor, the better it works, the worse it is.
Well, they don't offer the programs that we do. We're the only ones approved by professional bodies. So that's the
Okay, well, that's another reason people should choose you. It's like voting in the former Soviet Union. Got one choice. Okay, anyone else? Yes?
I'm in the martial arts business, and basically we build people's character through the martial arts.
Okay. And why should people choose your company?
We were just voted best of martial arts studio by the San Diego Chamber and also with the Union Tribune.
Okay. So you won a popularity contest.
True, and also feedback from customers from Yelp.
Okay.
Pretty much 5-star reviews.
Okay. So as you hear this, so if this is your potential customer base, you'd see, does that resonate with them or not? We're not going to do that now because we're going to keep going, but normally that's what you would do. So these are very fundamental questions, and they're really hard to answer thoroughly. I'm very impressed. You got through 2 of them in a minute and a half each. That's really good. Okay, the second topic, the power of the customer. First off, this is a healthcare example. What is the customer? How do you conceive of them? And this is not meant to be a semantic exercise. The label you use matters. If in healthcare you think of them as a customer, that's very different than a patient. A patient sounds more passive and is treated more passively. A customer has more rights and privileges. At Disney, you are a guest. In a hospital, you're typically a patient. I remember when I was in grad school studying public health, and a instructor said, if you go, we talk about helping people change their lifestyle and eat better and exercise and all kinds of things like that. In that case, you want to be a customer. But if you have an axe in your head and you're rushed to the emergency room, do you really want to be empowered? Or do you want someone to fix the problem? Sometimes you just want someone to fix the problem. I'm a patient. I don't know what to do. Fix it. Don't tell me. Just fix it. So different labels for different times, but it's fundamental to how you do business if you conceive of the people you're serving as customers versus consumers, and likewise. So my recommendation is adopt one and move forward with it. Commit to it. Second is understanding customers, distinguishing between needs and wants. What do you think drives what people buy more, needs or wants? Who thinks needs? Okay. Who thinks, so this is one of the ones you have to vote for. No abstention. Who thinks wants? All right. In America, it's typically wants. Though we often, when we assess things, we focus on what people need. So we sometimes miss the mark. And then, what do they think about you? Do they know you exist? Do they like you? Do they have preconceptions about you? Do they get you confused? I was talking to my wife, who knows San Diego pretty well, and she said, so where are you speaking today? Is it UCSD? I said, no, it's the other one. USD. Oh, the one on the hill. So that's where it lives in her mind, and imagine you get that insult often by being mistaken for UCSD. These things happen. So learn where you live in people's hearts and minds in order to shape where you will end up, where you want to be. The other thing is to look at some ways of thought that have developed, like CRM tools. Anybody familiar with these? Okay, so I'm guessing if you have your hands down, that means you are familiar with them. Customer relationship management. Ever since I switched to that mode, that people vote by keeping their hands down, I get an incredible response rate. It's really amazing. So CRM started as a way of thinking, how do we manage relationships with customers? And it's turned into software. So there's Salesforce and a bunch of others that are good. They do important things, but CRM really, in my view, is a way of thinking. So when you go down this path, it's easy to get caught up in the stuff of it and lose sight of the thinking behind it. We're putting our customers first. That's a way of thinking. And you don't have to have software to get that and to keep that. You might need software to keep track of people, but that's fundamentally different. So don't lose sight of what the relationship management is about. And the intimacy, the customer intimacy, launches it a step further. Intuit is an example, homegrown example of an organization that has a program called Follow Me Home. You may be familiar with this. The CEO started this at least 20 years ago. He'd be in the store when people bought Intuit software. Then it was Quicken, was their flagship product. And he'd say, can I follow you home and watch how you use that? Might sound kind of creepy, but, but it worked. And he'd watch how people use it and what problems they have. And after doing that for a few years, they realized a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses were using Quick and trying to adapt it for small businesses. And they said, well, they shouldn't be doing that. Our customer, why are they doing? We didn't make it. We made this as personal finance software. Why are they misusing it? And then someone said, aha, opportunity. Let's create a different kind of product, hence QuickBooks, that has huge market share, that's made for the problems people are trying to deal with. So often we close our eyes to what's right in front of us because it's not what we had in mind. And if we take the blinders off, things go much better and we see new opportunities, like Intuit coming up with QuickBooks through their Follow Me Home research. And as an aside, their CEO last year did 20 or 30 of these himself, and they're a pretty big company. But he himself is going out into homes still as a CEO after 20 odd years and seeing and feeling what customers are doing.